Today I'd like to tell you about one of my personal heroes. We're going to call him Finn for the purpose of the discussion. It's not his real name, but I don't want to embarrass him or anything like that. But personally, I find him to be one of the most amazing individuals I've ever met, not to mention a fantastic writer. When the story begins, I hadn't met Finn yet. I met his family first. They owned a laundromat, and I owned an ancient dryer that was always breaking down. So I spent a lot of time there, and I got to know most of his family. I got to know his grandma. I got to know his mom, nice lady. I got to know his dad. And his dad was a dynamo, and he was the force behind the business. He had a lot of skills that he could use. He was an amazing mechanic. Anything happened to any of those machines, he could fix it himself. So they were set up pretty well for their business. But the thing that most impressed me about this man is that he was careful to hire differently abled people to help out in the laundromat. And he tended to hire from Magic City, which is an organization here in Cheyenne that helps differently abled people to achieve their employment dreams. And Magic City, an organization here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And he was always very compassionate and very kind, but he also had a huge sense of civic responsibility. When 9/11 occurred, he joined the Army because he wanted very much to serve and to help defend his country, because to him, his circle of responsibility didn't begin and end with his family. He wanted to protect all of us, keep all of us safe. So he joined the military, he joined the Army, and he was almost immediately deployed. By the time he came back, his oldest son, Finn, had started school, and his son and mine were in the same class. Now, my son had a few developmental challenges, and Finn stood head and shoulders above the rest of the kids in my eyes, because whenever they played any kind of game, he chose my son to be on his team. When they played soccer, he made sure he passed everyone the ball, no matter how good at soccer they happened to be. And they passed it back to him to make the goals because they wanted to win. But he was an amazing young man, and I was really impressed with his leadership potential and how much he took after his father. Well, the years passed, and things had not worked out exactly the way that Finn's family expected. When he had joined the service, he had expected to join for a specific amount of time, but the Army had put him on inactive duty after he'd been deployed. He'd been back for a while. He had chosen not to re-enlist, but they had put him on inactive, and they kept calling him back up for deployment. And this was very hard on his family, and it was really hard on his business, because he's the person that could do all the repairs, and none of the other people in his family could do it. So now when the machines broke down, they had to pay an expensive repair fee, and their business was slowly coming apart. And there wasn't a whole lot that they could do about it. He was gone for 18 months once, and it was his third time out. And his wife was at her wit's end. She had 3 little kids, and she was trying to run the business, and she couldn't do all of the work that was required, and she couldn't keep it in the black, and it was heading off in the red. And before he got back, they had lost the business. When he did get back, they fought a lot. They had a hard time. It was difficult for them. And they thought, well, that's okay. He's been out 3 times to Afghanistan. Surely he won't be called back again. They were working on their marriage. They're trying to make things work. And Finn kept being amazing. He could have chose to be angry. He could have chosen to be upset. His standard of living changed. He was spending a lot more time at his grandma's house while his parents tried to work things out. He didn't choose to be angry. He didn't choose to be upset. He chose to increase his empathy and compassion for other people. He was just a kid. I am so proud of the way that he reacted to his challenges. When they told him they couldn't afford his hockey anymore, and he loved hockey, but hockey's expensive, and where we live, hockey requires a lot of travel. And so his mom just couldn't do it anymore, just couldn't take him anymore. His dad was gone at the time, and he'd had to give up hockey, which he loved. And he was, it was unfair, but he just said, well, sometimes things aren't fair. And he just kept going. Then they got the news that his dad would be deployed a 4th time to Afghanistan. And his mom and dad decided to divorce. This was super hard on Finn, as you can imagine. He was already helping take care of his 2 younger sisters and get them to school, and now he was spending even more time with Grandma while his mom tried to get a good job and get set up in a new place. It was really tough. And he decided to write an essay about it. And because he knows that I write, he wanted me to take a look at it for him, which I was honored to do. And that was the very best essay that I have ever read. It was the best memoir I've ever read. In it, he began starting out as though we were talking about another boy, and then kind of segued into, this is my life, this is what's happening to me. And he described the impact that all of these deployments had had on his family. And he described his parents' struggles without rancor, without blame, just saying how it was, and how difficult it was for him and his sisters, how they had lost their business, they had lost their standard of living, they were struggling to make ends meet now, and 2 households are more expensive than one, and how they were spending a lot of time with Grandma, who didn't really have the resources or the energy to take care of them, so he was doing most of the childcare at age 10, and he didn't write any of this angrily or with any rancor at all. He simply wrote about it with compassion for his parents and his grandparent. He wrote about it from his heart, and he tied it up as a heartfelt plea to the people who make the decisions in the military to send people out on deployments. And he described the total impact it had had on his family, and said he really believed that it would be wiser for them to consider the impact it would have on people with young children before they sent them out on 4 deployments to Afghanistan. And he talked about how much time it took his dad to kind of recalibrate and get back into the regular world when he returned. And it was masterful. And he did it all in just a few pages. And I remember what I thought first was, good job, Ben. The second thing I thought was that his father's commander really needed to read it. And the third thing I thought was, what an amazing young man. Things had been unfair. Situations had happened that Finn had not caused and had had no control over, but he had still remained true to himself, and he was still as kind and compassionate and empathetic as ever. And he was still fair to an unfair world. No matter what happens, we can still remain true to our essential core, to our beliefs, to who we know that we are. Thanks, Finn.